So, last but not least, I'm here with Dr. Martin Schmidt from the Technische Universität Darmstadt and Leibniz Zentrum für zeithistorische Forschung in Potsdam. My first question, what is zeithistorische Forschung Potsdam in English?
The Center for Contemporary History. We are one of the two big centers for contemporary history in Germany. We have one center in Potsdam where I did my PhD. We are more concerned with the history of Eastern Europe, or especially Eastern Germany. Meanwhile, the Institute for Contemporary History in Munich is more concerned about the history of National Socialism and the war period. So this is kind of a mixture. We take more care about media studies, media history, and GDR history, and history of the former Eastern Bloc. Meanwhile, they have a specialty also in bureaucratic processes.
Okay, so that is what you are working for, but tell us a bit about yourself, make a short introduction, and also your first computer and your first or most memorable video game from this time.
Yes, sure. I'm Martin Schmidt, and I studied history and computer science at the University of Tübingen, Madrid, and Cambridge. And I was always interested in history, but I thought for the job market it might be better to do something usable. So I decided to combine those two things, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. I started to learn programming, Java, and all this stuff. And then in 2008, a professor of mine who worked on the history of the 1970s and how the coming of the information society changed German economy, West German economy. And there I got hooked because suddenly I saw the potential of analyzing computer science or computer development as a historical process. And I started to work on the history of the internet and wrote my thesis on this. I was really happy to being able to publish it at Transcript in 2016, Internet im Kalten Krieg, Internet in the Cold War, a prehistory of the global communication network. And through this, I was able then to get a PhD position at the Center for Contemporary History in Potsdam, where I was part of a bigger group, and we looked at the history of computing in both Germanys and different sectors. We had one special project on the history of computer use in society. This was Julia Erdogan, who worked on hackers. I did the economy part and looked at how computers were used in banks in East and West Germany. We had a project on state use of computers. This was Thomas Kasper, who worked on the pension systems. And we had one project by Rüdiger Bergien on state security and police forces in East and West Germany. This group was led by Professor Frank Bösch, my supervisor, and I finished my PhD in just like last year, 2019. And now working for Technical University in Darmstadt. My first computer, wow, that's quite a while. I think it was in the 1990s. My father worked at a big Western company and brought a Toshiba computer, Toshiba laptop, one of these wide, big ones. And he had a floppy disk with Prince of Persia on it. And this is still one of my favorite games. I was a teenager and it was way too difficult for me to successfully get it through, but I tried so many times and it's still often in my mind. And it shows, I think, in a great way, not only how challenging old computer games were, but also about the impression we have on a cultural level, like this idea of Orientalism is deeply written into this game, and it is also like in this context of time, 1990s, Aladdin, and those stories, which are super famous at that time, and I really like to play the game.
And it's also it is the first or one of the first that use the motion capturing because the hero is the brother of Jordan Mechner, and they made a video. He was driving in the car and was filming his brother running around making these jumps, and this was very awesome for this time for a computer game. And he released all the material on YouTube a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's very cool game. It's still a very cool game, and I mean, still a very interesting brand also for Ubisoft because they release. I think a remake of not the first one, but one of the 2009 or 2010 versions. So it's still an important brand for this company and for video gamers. But to start with important brands, and this was very interesting in my time because I was raised in Western Germany, and I was worked with Commodore computers. Like my first computer was the Commodore 16, then the 64, and then the Amiga. So here was most of the hardware was from US or Japan, like consoles. So in a documentary, this Auferstanden aus Platinen, it was very interesting to see that also in the GDR, computer clubs are using Commodore computers, and it was very, for me, I said, okay, this was Western techniques. Why was it possible to get this or use it there?
Well, this question has two levels. First of all, how to get it privately or how to use it collectively. I mean, we from a Western perspective, people tend to look at it from the view of owning a computer. Meanwhile, the socialist system look way more about collective use of computers. So to go directly on the point, how could you get a computer? I mean, for privately, it was the biggest or the best possibility to get it was through Western contacts. So, for example, you had a grandmother in the West, and she wanted to give you a present, and then she had a catalog where she could like do a little cross and like order it through the catalog.
Auto catalog, yeah.
And it was then shipped. The not so legal way, for example, it was the same also for professional users to get one and buy one during Western contacts. So, for example, when you drove to West Berlin and there bought a computer and brought it to Eastern Germany, this was the second possibility. And one interesting possibility how Western technology got into the GDR was through other Eastern countries. So, for example, the State Bank, they used teletypes for their data processing systems, and they were produced in Czechoslovakia. And they had a license through Siemens, which would never been possible for Robotron and other producers. So there, this like way around GDR through other countries was also a certain possibility. But all in all, to get one privately was not that evil that easy. The second level of this question is the collective use. There were computer clubs in GDR and many other Eastern countries, and there they were equipped by the state, and they bought Western technology like C64 through, I would call it channels.
Okay.
You could use, for example, state security to give them like a wish list. And one amazing source I found was how Erich Honecker ordered through state security for his, I think it was nephews, um, or his daughter. I'm not quite sure, but he ordered a list of computer games, C64, through state security in the West. So if you had like the channels, then it was possible.
But Raid over Moscow was not on this list, or?
I have not seen.
Okay. Yeah, that is quite interesting fact for me, because as I know, it was very. I mean, if you watch in East Berlin Western television, you never told someone, because it could bring you in really danger. To say, hey, I watched the Tagesschau yesterday, and so this could be a life danger situation for you. So then I was surprised that the official computer clubs got these Amigas, and they was bought for them. I said, okay, why bought they Western technology for them? That's something that's a bit strange for me right now.
My hypothesis on this is that the GDR built up their country as one that is heavily relying on information technology. And this question is not possible to answer if you just look at the end phase of the GDR or look at it from a failing state, but to have the bigger picture in mind. So in the 1950s already, there was computer development from Zeiss, a company working in opticals, and they developed their first computer. And this was then mass produced for scientific purposes. And there, the GDR oriented towards Soviet Union, where also in 1958 Khrushchev developed a plan for the computerization of the country through data centers. And in 1963, the party, the Socialist Party of the GDR, put in place the first program for electronic data processing. And this was a master plan for the country to get into the information age. And this plan was put in place and brought through with all the power the party had. So in 1966, 1967, they evaluated the program. If the use in economy and state is like what they expected, it was not, so they changed the structure. This all is now on a state level, on an economic level. So public use was not included in this. But in the 1970s, the technological basis or the technological base changed towards smaller and mid-sized computers. So that in 1977, Erich Honecker and his collaborators, in the name of the party, to bring forward the socialism through technology or scientific technological revolution, put in place the program for microelectronics in 1977. And through this plan, there was a big development for computers. And this was not only towards a base of hardware, which was distributed and produced in the whole Eastern Bloc, but it was also societal concept of how a future state should look like. And socialism always was seen as a modern project. And this then was connected towards technology, and the technology of the future was the computer. So in the 1980s, now I set the base, in the 1980s, they tried to get the people educated. And this was not only in the GDR, but we have similar developments in other Eastern Bloc countries. They tried to educate the people for the information age. So you might know about the BBC computer and the BBC program to educate the whole society for the information age. This had its counterparts in West Eastern countries. So the Soviet Union set in place a big program to educate pupils and also like the society in the use of computers. I mean, they did not have that many computers, so it was also quite theoretical. But everybody knew how, or not everybody knew, but many people were shown how to program, even without a computer. I mean, you could write code without executing it. So in this regard, this development has to be understood, because also in the 1970s, GDR, to get back to the topic of GDR, had also developed, for example, the different kind of play, for example, the Picodat, which was like an electronic, playful way of bringing the society towards the technology of the future. I mean, the GDR did not have the resources like the Soviet Union to like sell, so they needed a good, well-educated workforce. And so, coming now to the conclusion, why the state allowed the use of Western technology and computer games in such computer clubs, it was to educate the people in the sense of socialism, so that they could be educated workers who sell high quality products to Western states, to their own states, to have an educated workforce, because that was the unique point they had in competition to other countries. So this is quite important. You could also develop this argument further if you look at the military and state security. So many of the people who could program were then used in military and state security, but this only was a small portion. If you look at the whole economy and the whole state, the need for programmers, the need for well-educated and skillful workers was very, very high. For example, Robotron also developed software for Volkswagen in the 1980s. They needed programmers for that, women and men. This is very important to point at, because here we have a difference in comparison to Western Germany, where also women were educated in computer technology to produce software for their own sake and for export. And the computer games were a very nice little way to get their encouragement and to get them hooked on computers and to get them more leaning towards information technology.
So, maybe looking take a view to the games a bit. So they had the Commodores there at the computer club, and then they're playing games, Western games. So as you said, they're looking for people that they can develop, and so they can get them to Robotron or to the military or to the state security. So maybe it was not the fact that they don't know what happened on the screen, because some games you still get what happens on the screen, and it was not the way the GDR thought. Was it maybe they said, okay, yeah, give them their little freedom, they're just playing games, but then we can use them later as developer, programmer, so we let them a bit freedom for this, but then we can educate them for us as a developer. Maybe that was also a bit the intention, to let them play the games.
Yes, definitely. So state security knew what they did in those computer clubs, and they understood. But yes, left them freedom. I mean, you need to imagine dictatorship not as a one-sided monolith. So there were areas of negotiation between the people and state security. So, for example, especially the heads of those computer clubs always negotiated, and there were limits. So, for example, Raid over Moscow was then forbidden, but other games were allowed to be played. And it also differed from computer club to computer club. But especially in Berlin, they were highly monitored, and they had the people there. They knew what it is happening, and they had also skillful people, because I mean they were one of the first computer users in the GDR since 1965. But in general, there was the higher aim was to get the people towards using the computers, and then they were just like pragmatic in this sense.
Okay, yeah, okay. I was talking about Commodore, but what I also say when I looked for this interview, the different areas in the Iron Curtain, there were also difference in using a computer, and what computer, because Commodore was in the GDR, I mean, successful, and Romania and Czech Republic, Poland, they got the ZX Spectrum or clone systems from it. So why there was such a difference in these computers, using these computers?
Well, this scene is not quite new, because it was the same in the 1960s already. So if you look at the Eastern Bloc from the perspectives of the producers, it was an interesting market. And in the 1960s already, the Czechs and the Polish, they used French or British machines. Meanwhile, the GDR loved the IBM machines. And the Soviet Union also had a tendency towards IBM, but also had imported some British machines. And it was always about the embargo policy. So there was an embargo in place, which I published a little paper on, because it was not always very strict. There were ways around it. And if you just imagine, if you started like your basic infrastructure on certain machines, and have good contacts towards certain producers who tried to get a foot into the market, then this already is a starting point. And it was more or less the same in the 1980s. So there were, for example, like contacts between the Polish towards the British, because they always had some kind of connection. And for example, you have Yugoslavia, where you had a different kind of socialism. different type of socialism. Meanwhile, the GDR was a very strict oriented state towards Moscow. And so this is like a very heterogeneous scene where there were many players. And it also depended from time to time on personal connections through the Iron Curtain. And the Iron Curtain never was like very departing, but also it was always possible to get technology, knowledge, and people through. It was the same with Siemens, who tried to get a foot in the market in the 1970s, and this happened then in the 1980s. I mean, you needed a basis to produce and to mass produce. So if like one economy got a license by another producer, then they had this. And just a small remark on this Soviet Union thing. I mean, it's super interesting that you saw that they, for example, produced those handhelds where you could already play mobile games. Japan was also on the scene, and it was always a question of what kind of also microchips the economy produced. And but in total, if you ask people from the 1980s in the GDR, they did not know what the Soviet Union had to offer technological anymore. So they oriented also towards different channels in the West.
Okay. From the, I want to move a little bit in a really other direction right now, because we are now nearly at the end of our talk. So Robotron, the developer of the computer systems in the GDR, they were not exporting systems. Also, all they were for internal use for the GDR and this market. So, what do you think would happen with Robotron, or also with the computer development and also the computer scene, if the GDR was still there today, or could last longer than 1989 and 1990?
Yeah, that's an important question, because it is closer to the historical reality of the 1989 scene. The protesters did not want to dissolve socialism. The protesters at the beginning wanted a different type of socialism. And it is very important to pose that question and to look at the historical openness of the late 1980s, early 1990s. Stephen Kotkin, an important professor who wrote a lot on the history of the Soviet Union, for example, showed that the Soviet Union could have survived very well through the export of oil and natural resources in not an overstretched empire, but a state that is like back in the form or in the shape of Russia, could have survived quite well. And if you just look at the Chinese model, they also adopted socialism towards a very high tech nation. So the problem for the GDR was that they did not have natural resources, and that they did not have the markets then anymore, because the other markets, the socialist markets, dissolved. And they had also the problem that they then needed different products to export. And just to point at this, Robotron exported a lot. of their software and of their computers.
Yeah.
They exported first of all to the socialist states and then also to the third world countries too. And different products they also exported to the West. But it is super interesting to look, for example, at Cuba, India. India had a lot of Robotron computers. So this model of copying and developing further might have been an option. I mean, they had the really high burden of not being able to deal with the economic rupture of the 1970s, where like the heavy industry dissolved in Western countries, like ship production and all those heavy industry stuff. And this was not put through in GDR. So this would have been a really big burden. But as they had a very well educated workforce, and could also a high level of knowledge in production management. In German, this is Werkzeugmaschinenbau or Maschinenbau, so tool production, tool machines. And this combination, I think, could have been a possibility with a less strict bureaucratic burden and a highly specialized information technology meets industrial production sector. Because if you look at the 1980s, there were already talks not only between Siemens and Robotron, but also between Robotron and smaller producers of, for example, tool machines in Western Germany, for example, for the production of microchips. But it could have been also in other areas. So as a cheaper producer of high quality goods, which is competitive to Western countries through the local conditions of payments that you did not pay the workers that much, could have been a possibility. I mean, the specific German reunification situation made this a little bit more difficult because there was the high drive towards a reunified state. And I think this development made things in some parts easier, and especially in information technology, many of the people found jobs and the possibility to work afterwards. So this story also has to be told because it's a great success. For example, if you look at those people who started playing in the computer clubs, then got educated through computer science career at the university, and then were like young when the wall came down, and suddenly they had the possibility to work for high salary in Western states or Western Germany, where they did not even have to learn another language. So I think if you look at these career paths in the 1980s, from gaming towards business success, it is very interesting to put through, like to develop a study to have a closer look at these career paths. So this is a not touched field where further studies have to be done by historians.
Okay, so maybe we can talk about this in a couple of years when you made these studies, and we can see, okay, hey, wow, this is quite a success story. So thank you for your time and for your explanation here. Yeah, and see you maybe at the next year or the maybe some other time.
Yes, you're very welcome, and thank you for giving me the possibility to talk today. And yeah, it was a great pleasure to also develop some wonderful ideas for further research projects with you together. So see you in some years.
Okay, bye.
Bye.